And please help me welcome Rob Marshall.
Hi, everybody. They don't make them like that anymore.
No, and thank you so much for, thank you so much for choosing this among the ones I suggested.
Yeah, it's such a, I don't know, it's a frothy, fabulous piece. You have to get into the style, but once you're kind of in it, you're in it. And, you know, it's so interesting when I watched this film just recently again. My parents are here, so I saw it with my parents in 1972, the re-release, because it came out in 1967. So in 72, saw it then. And of course, the anticipation of seeing Julie Andrews, was so huge. She was, at this time, I don't know if you're aware, in 67, she was the #1 top box office star, which was incredible for a woman, number one, but also someone in musicals. But it was the combination of Mary Poppins and Sound of Music. And so the anticipation of seeing this incredible, vehicle was unbelievable. And I just remember, I don't remember a lot about it except for Julie. Not terrible to say, but it's true. That's what I remember. I just remember because it's one of those rare things, it's a star vehicle, which is sort of the end of the golden age of musicals. That's what I really felt, when I think about this, because they didn't make star vehicles, they didn't have stars. As it moved into the 60s and 70s, it just changed. The studio system changed, and
Please elaborate a little bit more on this particular moment of Hollywood, because it's a point you made in the quote you gave me the other day, and I really thought of it, that this was sort of like the end of the golden era. And
it really was. They used to make films specifically for Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, Judy Garland. They would build vehicles around them, create very thin storylines. It didn't really matter as long as the songs were there and the numbers were there for these people. And Julie came along. Mary Poppins was, in a way, a fluke for her because she came from the theater, and no one knew that she would develop. It was literally Mary Poppins and then directly into Sound of Music. They both opened like literally almost back to back, and she won the Oscar for Poppins. And then it was sort of like all of a sudden there was this grand musical star which they could create a vehicle. And I think many people know that she began on Broadway here in New York in the Boyfriend, which is very much the style of this piece. And what happened was they tried to get the rights to The Boyfriend to do for Julie. She was 19 when she did it on Broadway in 1954. And so the rights were much too expensive, so they created their own version of The Boyfriend. So what's fascinating and fun for me is you kind of get a sense of what Julie would have been doing in The Boyfriend in this film. You see the style, the humor, that's what's sort of extraordinary about her in this film for me, is that she understands with every pore of her body this kind of spoof. It's not easy to look into the camera, which she does a lot, and play that the way she does because she feels it. A lot of people can do sort of pastiche things like that, and it feels empty. Somehow Julie is able to do that, but also fill it with humanity. And she's just a true movie star because of that. You can feel the movie. In the second half, it starts to flounder a little bit. You know that. You can see that because the musical numbers stop happening. She holds it, though. She continues to hold it right to the very end.
And this is also, I think, the first film where she really shows this sort of incredible intuition for physical comedy. Really,
Yes.
the comic timing and the body is
Yes, it seems like Blake Edwards was like right nearby because that was like destined to happen for sure for her. I have to say you're absolutely 100% right. The physical comedy and the dancing, because you never see her. You don't in Poppins. You see her dance a little bit. Not much, and then in Sound of Music, very little. So here she gets to dance. I worked with Julie Andrews. I choreographed a production of Victor Victoria on Broadway for her, which was a thrill of my life. Thank you. That was such just to be able to work with her, and Blake Edwards had never ever directed theater before, so that was an incredible experience to work with the two of them, very closely with them. And she she was, a dancer. And I remember when we were working on Victor Victoria, we were actually in New York in previews, and Blake said, "You know what? Julie really tap dances." And I said, "Oh, well, of course she does. I mean, the elevator number is spectacular. It's such a brilliant idea." And she's really tapping. That's all her. I mean, even when they're just showing the feet, that's Julie's. Those are Julie's feet. That's not like they're, that's all Julie. And I remember Blake said to me, "We really should put a tap number in." And so I went off while we were literally, the show was playing, and I created a tap number for her in the second act called "You and Me" with Tony Roberts. And it was just so great to see her do what she does. I mean, she's really a great dancer. The place you'll see her dance the most probably is in her television show, and that's on YouTube. but you can see she's really an incredible dancer and physical comedian.
We hope that to be able to show to bring some of the TV shows here for the retrospective.
It'd be great for people to see, because she's the real thing. She's a real dancer. She feels it. She's, she always says, "Oh, I'm not a dancer." She's a dancer. She's a great dancer.
And the film had great production design. Elmer Bernstein won the Academy Award.
Yes, although I spoke to Giulia about that. She said that she really felt it was Andre Previn who was the one who did the work with her, because they split up the work. The songs were done by, and all the arrangements were done by Andre Previn, and then the score that sort of in between was Elmer Bernstein. So Julie said to me that she felt kind of bad for Andre that he didn't win the Oscar for it, just Elmer Bernstein, because it was really a collaboration, and he was such a huge part of it for her.
And one thing that, going back to what you were talking about before, about the era of the musical, there is the film has a feel of a spoof of the 20s, and so it's a little
very much so.
It's a little has that postmodern quality. It's almost not taking itself so seriously.
Yeah, that's that came from The Boyfriend as well. It was a spoof of the 20s, spoof of 20s films here, because there's a lot of work that George Roy Hill, the director, a lot of the silent movie, Cards, things like that, the black and white. Julie, actually, we connected before this, and she was explaining to me that George Roy Hill tried to do it, most of the palette of all the scenes, the design in black and white, and would add a single color to a scene. So I don't know if you noticed, Julie was mostly in black and white with red. So that was her color. Or in something like the tapioca number, it was a black and white scene, but he added gray and yellow to that. That was he decided to sort of try and keep it in sort of the feeling of a silent movie, but add a color here and a color there. In the Jewish wedding scene, there was a lavender he wanted to bring into it. But he had a very specific design for the whole thing, trying to emulate. I mean, obviously, these were big for him as a child, going to silent movies. And then it's interesting, his next film after this was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which he also continued that sort of silent movie-esque feel. And The Sting, which he won the Oscar for, was also in that style, in that vein. He loved that time period, and he kept exploring it.
And do you think that, and then I'll open to the public, I don't want to be greedy, but do you think that, I mean, you mentioned before, she did Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music, and it would have been easy to just stay there. And part of the reason that I'm loving doing the retrospective is also to share how adventurous she's been through her career, and this is like kind of a daring thing to do, because she's it's not that girl anymore.
Well, it's interesting, when you play nanny and then a nanny, like a nanny, with children all around you, it's sort of like, how do you break that? Because that's how she was beloved. And so it was very smart of her. First of all, just prior to this film, she'd worked with George Roy Hill again on this epic film called Hawaii, which was a very brutal film for her to do, really tough. If you watch it, it's an incredible film, and you see what she goes through. It was tough. She said to me that George Roy Hill really tested his leading ladies. And on Hawaii, there was a lot that she was having to go through because of the elements and what they were asked to do. And she said in this film, when she is hanging by that flagpole, She said she almost broke her arms, and she said, but he tested his leading ladies, and she was like, I'm gonna do it and hold on to that flagpole. But she really is, she loved working with him, but she was very smart to do something else, something stylish, and I think she wanted to pull from that incredible, work that she did in The Boyfriend, and because she did it so brilliantly, and that was her sort of big, fabulous debut on Broadway.
Raise your hand if you have a question.
I'm happy to talk about anything.
There's one there. There is one right there.
Yes, I know, My Fair Ladies.
Fair Lady.
Yes, exactly. Well, what was incredible is that she really was this great stage actress that went from exactly The Boyfriend to My Fair Lady, then to Camelot, and I don't think really had the intention that she would actually become a film star in any way, shape, or form until Walt Disney came to see her in Camelot, and said, we'd like you to do Mary Poppins, and so, and she was pregnant with Emma. Is Emma still here?
Yeah, she's right there.
Where's Emma? She was pregnant with Emma at that time, so they had to wait. So Emma stalled the whole production right there. But it's an incredible story. I mean, Julie's beautiful memoirs. She has two that are out that are so incredible to read, and you get a full sense of what she was juggling and how she was working to navigate a career and a family at the same time, a big, beautiful family, and she did it. It was extraordinary.
I think there is a question there.
When this film was done, obviously it would not be politically correct to do this film today.
You mean that last line about being a woman and not being an equal?
No,
that part
about the Chinese.
Yeah, that too, of course.
And did it get any negative feedback when it was originally released?
You know what?
That subject.
Yeah, I think there has definitely been a backlash about that for sure. It was just such it's such a different time. It was a different time where that kind of thing. You see Jerry Lewis, in his films, what he was doing. I mean, even Mickey Rooney and playing a Chinese man in Breakfast at Tiffany's. But it's funny how what seemed funny at the time, and the great B. Lilly, who plays Miss Mears. She's. I mean, this was her last film. Great British stage actress, legendary. I'm sure that all is changed. In fact, it was changed for the Broadway production that was done of Thoroughly Modern Millie. That's for sure. It was adjusted to make it much more PC, which is exactly what we should be doing. Exactly.
Question? There.
As you would know, what are some of the difficulties and similarities in adapting these musicals to the screen?
Well, I think what the hardest things are the adaptations, because this luckily was an original piece, even though there are songs from way back like Babyface and things like that. But there is also some new songs like Thoroughly Modern Millie and the Tapioca and things like that by Sammy Cahn. And so, it really it's almost in some ways easier creating an original musical from the beginning instead of having to adapt, because I've had to adapt many Broadway shows, Chicago, Into the Woods, for example, 9, taking these musicals, and it's such a unique thing. When you walk into a theater, you're in an artificial place, and when people start to sing, it's fine. But when you're watching a film, it's such a realistic medium. You completely have to come up with a reason why people sing. If someone just starts to sing in the middle of their living room, it's embarrassing. It's that feeling you feel when it hasn't been earned, and you have to figure out conceptually why people sing. In this movie, it was very clear that they created a stylized world right from the very beginning at the Universal backlot, which I've shot on that back lot, which is fantastic. It has those New York streets, know it very well. I did an original movie musical called Mrs. Santa Claus with Angela Lansbury that Jerry Herman wrote. On all those streets, I know every little square inch of those streets. In fact, when they're driving down those streets, they're literally driving down the same street over and over and over again. And only I would know that watching it. But it's it's so great to be able to work in the studio system like that and work in a back lot like that. You know, it's rare, you know, that you get to do that. I'm always off doing movies somewhere else, not in Hollywood anymore.
Speaking of adaptations, what were the challenges in adapting Victor Victoria? Which we show, by the way, in June with
Yes, I know, she was here for that. You know what? Thing about movie musicals, to stage, which was what that was. So that was a different thing. Sometimes it's the opposite, right? Stage to movie. But movie to stage, you have to flesh out the world a little bit more because there's an intermission, they're longer. You have more numbers to create for people. So, you know, Victor Victoria, if you see the film, there are not many numbers. It's mostly the numbers that happen in the cabaret. But as a Broadway musical, you needed to flesh it out. So the tricky thing was Henry Mancini wrote the music for the film, and just before we were going into production, he passed away. It was so difficult. He wrote the music with Leslie Bricusse, and they called him Hank, and there was like, so they were like, what do we do? Hank passed away. So Leslie Bricusse stepped up and did the music and the lyrics, and for the material, and it was tricky. And it was very interesting for me because I was the outsider, and it was this team: Leslie Bricusse, Blake Edwards, Julie Andrews. You know, they were like the closest of friends and had worked together a million times, and so they were. It was very interesting to be sort of a fly on the wall watching how they worked, and I was always like the mediator in the middle. But they were. You know, Leslie did a magnificent job, but it was tricky because right at the start of it we lost like a big piece of it.
There was a question, someone there that I passed. Yes, right there.
I was just curious how often, like back at this time, that things would go from a movie to a musical. Mm-hmm. Like it seems like, so this went from The Boyfriend on Broadway to the movie Thoroughly Modern Millie, and then to another musical back as Thoroughly Modern Millie.
Well, that actually happens a lot, but that's actually not quite correct because The Boyfriend is not this. What they basically did was took the idea of The Boyfriend and the stylization of a 20s musical spoof and did their own original piece. But it happens a lot where you know, I mean, it's incredible how many sort of variations there are of people. I think now it's people want recognizable IPs, if that makes sense to you. So they want to see Mrs. Doubtfire on, or they want to see Tootsie, or they want to see something they know, because theater's so expensive. I think that's a big part of it. You don't want to risk it on something you've never heard of. So that's why a lot of movies now are becoming stage shows.
What's your favorite number in Millie?
Well, my favorite is actually not a number, but it feels like a number to me. I think it's genius. It's when Julie becomes a vamp. Do you remember she steps out of her room and she decides she's going to go to the office and be a vamp and get her boss that way? And she steps out in that black-white outfit with that sort of hat with the and she has the sort of vampy makeup on, and it's scored like a dance number. And I'm sure Joe Layton did it, who I worked with. I worked with the choreographer Joe Layton, who choreographed this film, who was fantastic and hilarious and crazy. I did a television show as a dancer and I assisted the choreographer. Joe Layton directed this piece, and it was Julie Stein. It was a tribute to Julie Stein. So I worked with him, but I know Joe did this because he's just so funny and so imaginative. He did all the Barbra Streisand specials, and he's incredible. And anyway, I don't know if you remember, she's walking, she looks back at the camera, and she walks out into the street. She's in the elevator and just does a hip, and it's just perfect, and Julie is genius in it. And I was watching it with my partner, John DeLuca, the other night, and I said, no one can do that. What Julie's doing right there, no one can do now. No one. Because she brings herself, which it's that thing you can't, it's an impossible thing to sort of figure out what that is, that star power, that thing. She just, she has that. It's personality. It's her take. It's her feeling about something, and you don't see stars like that, and that's why they created this entire piece for her.
Her origins, where she was born in England, and but her family, how was she? What kind of a family did she come from?
Yes, well, she was born in Walton-on-Thames, right where her future husband Tony Walton was actually also born. And I mean, Emma can speak to this better than I can, but I here's what I know: she was a child of a broken home. She had a lot of, she had great people around her, but also had to navigate a very difficult family life. And I think a lot of performers come from that kind of pain, looking for a way to be accepted and find her way. And she had this, her stepfather was a voice teacher and had an incredible, was a singer himself. And so, and with her mother too, and they did a vaudeville act and brought Giulia out, and they found out that she had this incredibly freakish voice where she had octaves and octaves of, range, where she could sing, and they couldn't believe it. And so she went right into these, as a child, into this, I think there was a massive, very famous review that she did that got her all the attention, and then she sang for the Queen. That you can actually see on YouTube too. This little sweet little, 12-year-old or something singing for the Queen. God Save the Queen. I mean, it's, and it's just sort of like she, and then was in the pantomimes playing, like Goldilocks or Snow White or Cinderella, Emma knows. And, she found her way to theater. And then when and I think the seminal moment for her, she has said to me, was My Fair Lady, because she had to then really learn how to act. She was coming from singing and from pastiche pieces and reviews, and there she was playing this incredibly detailed character of Eliza Doolittle, and had to become, this great actress opposite Rex Harrison, who demanded a lot. And so, she really found her way on her own. Here's the great thing about working with Julie. She just it's in her blood. Do when she comes on stage, there are a few people that I think of that I've worked with that are like this, like Chita Rivera is one of them. They walk on stage and they own the stage. It's their home. They're a home. It's not like they're renting. They own it. They own it. And that's what it was. It was very exciting to be part of Victor Victoria on stage with her, because she was coming back to Broadway after I don't even know how many years. I think 30-something years, and coming, and she just is a generous soul. You can't fake that. That beauty, that generosity, that humor, that fun. She's the real thing.
And before we go upstairs for a glass of wine and to see the show that actually shares a little bit more about Julie Andrews' early years and her collaboration with Tony Walton, I have a question, an unrelated question for you. Rob has a film. It's not coming up until the spring, but and it's another musical. And so can you talk a little bit about it?
Sure. The movie I've been working on for 4 years because of COVID. The Little Mermaid, the musical The Little Mermaid, I've directed a live-action version of that will be coming out next May. Very exciting. It's the most challenging film I've ever worked on. It's it's a beautiful tale, a very moving piece about someone who feels displaced and wants something different in their life. And it's a very simple story in many ways, but it's a massive film. We found this incredible, beautiful African-American girl to play Ariel, whose name is Halle Bailey, who you'll be seeing. She has a little of what's going on up there. She has that. The camera loves her, but also she has so much depth and so much to bring. You know, you can't hide on film the way you can on stage. And you have to, because you can see right into the eyes, you feel it. And, you know, she has that. We have Melissa McCarthy in the film, and Javier Bardem, and Aquafina, David Diggs, and all kinds of wonderful, fabulous people. But it was, it's a musical that most of the musical takes place underwater. So so every single square inch of that movie had to be literally detailed and choreographed every single second, because we were on apparatuses the entire time against blue screen. And it was an incredible experience. And now, you know, it should look seamless. You won't, when you see it, you won't see what it is. But it was complicated. We are using some of the most advanced technology to bring it to everyone. The greatest visual artists I've ever worked with in my life, and I have to say, it's unlike any movie you've ever seen.
Well, so thank you so much for having
Thank you,
taken
Julia.
time from that post-production to
yeah.
help us celebrate Julie
I was editing
Andrews.
today.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to see this. That means a lot to Julie. She'd be thrilled to hear.
Yeah, and see you upstairs.